Staff. Joining me now, Lieutenant General D.S. Hooda, the former Northern Army Commander. Good evening, sir. What is the critical role that the Chief of Defence Staff plays within, let's say, even the Nuclear Command Authority, not just reform, in the entire decision-making structure A to Z of the most important decisions which need to be taken as far as defence in our country, our basic defence is concerned? Which is why the question is, why is it important to have a CDS soon?
So as you said, Vishnu, there is of course focus on defence reforms, and these were fairly significant defence reforms that were undertaken, after the CDS was appointed. But as you rightly pointed out, one key role he has is he's a part of the Nuclear Command Authority, and so he actually is in charge of the Strategic Forces Command and the services interface between the Strategic Force Command and the political leadership. So he has a critical and important role to play.
General Hooda, therefore, the CDS was in a sense a one-stop shop for the Prime Minister to refer to in the event that we were at war or something very serious took place. Where would that advice come from in the present situation where we don't have a CDS at the moment? So,
the advice would come from the CDS, and also I'm sure the individual service chiefs would also be consulted. But he was appointed the single point advisor to the Prime Minister, and therefore I think it's essential that, the new appointment of the CDS be done as quickly as possible. Because, as you said, single point advisor, Nuclear Command Authority, military reforms, there is a lot that the CDS has to do. And so the quicker a new CDS is appointed, Vishnu, I think the better it will be.
Now, it's entirely the remit of the government to select the new Chief of Defence Staff. But there is talk it could be the current Army Chief General Naravane. There is talk that it could be somebody else as well. If it is from the topmost level of the Army, Air Force, Navy, then that means that's a line of succession which is so important. That gets altered, and it affects several officers going down the next several years. So that's a factor, isn't it?
It is, Vishnu, but I always believe that when you have senior army commanders, and all of them are fairly experienced, have gone through almost 40 years of service. So to say that if the line of succession is changed, we'll get somebody who's not as good, I think so. That assumption is not there. These are things that happen. So it's not as if it's happening for the first time. So General B.C. Joshi passed away, while in chair, and a new chief had to be appointed. So I think these are things that even senior leaders will take their stride. I don't see it creating any great kind of turbulence.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the reforms, the process that he started out. Some of them controversial, some of them less controversial, but trying to get the armed forces to work together to break out of their silos. How important is it, in whichever way, shape or form it ultimately is, but how important is this basic premise that we need to be much more integrated in how we deal with defense?
Vishnu, you've absolutely sort of hit the nail on the head. The principle that integration has to take place, that the three services must come together. They must get rid of their, current stovepipe approach. The 17 plus 2, 19 commands that exist today, each doing its own operational planning, that needs to go. And you're also right in saying that, what shape it takes is not as important as accepting that integration is necessary. And I think that's where the service chiefs and the CDS, sort of need to come together. And once you accept the premise that we need to integrate, then, you can find ways and means to do it.
Yeah.
So yes, somebody has reservations, somebody, is fine with it. Let's get rid of those. But we should not stall the integration process because there are some reservations.
Yeah. One of the other things which General Rawat spoke about quite warmly in the past, even publicly, was a greater induction of women in the armed forces. He was in fact spearheading that effort at one sense after the order was given that you just have to do it. And again, so that's a crucial reform which in its truest sense will perhaps play itself out not in a year from now or 2 years from now, but perhaps many years from now. But that process is now well underway. And he was overseeing that as well.
Absolutely, Vishnu. I think as far as induction of women into the Army and into the Air Force and Navy is concerned, I think the process now cannot be reversed. So he's put that in place. So there is acceptance that we will have women cadets in the National Defense Academy. There is acceptance that permanent commission will be given to women officers. And I think, frankly, it's a very good step. I mean, these doubts which people have about capabilities of women officers, in my service, having seen and worked with them, I didn't find any kind of problem.
Right. That's an interesting thought. I know we weren't meant to really discuss this aspect of it, but it's so wonderful to hear you, General Hooda, talk about your own personal experiences with women officers. Could you share or elaborate a little bit on how they've added to your professional requirements as an Army commander at various levels?
Vishnu, when I was 2005, I was in the Uri Brigade when this massive earthquake took place, and our own staff officers and a large number of them got injured. And so one of the crucial positions of what we call the brigade major, who deals with all the operational issues, that was held by a very young lady officer, a captain from the Army Education Corps. And she oversaw these, whatever work she had to do during a crisis like an earthquake, and super efficient, Vishnu. So as I said, I have not found, that there is any lack of either intent or professionalism or, the drive and grit that is required.
Let's talk a little bit about the Chief of Defence Staff, General Rawat. You've interacted with him extremely closely. You commanded the surgical strike, but General Rawat was also part of that decision-making process. How did that engagement, in terms of an actual military operation, how did that work out? I mean, how did you ideate with him, or did you ideate with him?
Yes, Vishnu, we did. So while a lot of the planning was done at the Northern Command in Udhampur, I used to go quite regularly to Army headquarters to present and brief about the plan with the Chief of Army Staff, General Dalbir, that time. And in the operations room used to be the DGMO, Director General Military Operations, and Vice Chief, who was General Bipin Rawat. And General Rawat had, commanded his division in Baramulla on the line of control. And some of our targets were across, those areas which he knew very well. So there was a lot of, discussion back and forth on what should be the type of targets, how should these, targets be engaged, what is the best route to go, because he had a good idea about the ground there. So he gave some very good suggestions. He gave some very good ideas that were then subsequently, put into our planning.
Were there ever disagreements?
There are sometimes, it's not, the whole process of planning for a major operation like this, will have, ideas will get thrown up. Some of those ideas, after discussion, we will say, no, let's not adopt that. Some ideas we will adopt. So this is a normal part of the planning process, Vishnu.
Yeah. Your final thoughts, sir, on General Rawat? Very sad, not just General Rawat and Mrs. Rawat, but also the other men who've perished. It's sad because, their mortal remains haven't been identified as yet. It's becoming very difficult. And one officer continues to fight for his life, an Air Force Group Captain. Your thoughts, sir?
So extremely tragic, Vishnu, and particularly for, some of us who personally knew General Rawat and Mrs. Rawat. I'm telling you, one of the most charming and gracious ladies that I have met. Even after our retirement, on birthdays and anniversaries, she would make it a point to, pick up the phone and call us. So for some of us, it's like a, deeply personal loss too, and very tragic.
Right. Well, General, thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us and joining us today. Indeed, the post of CDS so important. India needs a new CDS, but for tonight, certainly tomorrow when the cremation takes place, our thoughts very much with the family of all of those men who have lost their lives, and certainly our thoughts with that one officer who continues to fight for his life in that military hospital in Bengaluru. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishnu.